Do you sometimes wonder how you could truly have an impact when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging? How do you know you are moving in the right direction when it comes to becoming a more inclusive individual? As Diverse as Two Peas in a Pod brings topics such as ethnicity, genders, sexuality, or religion on the table. We talk about research and science, but also emotions, feelings, and vulnerability. We discuss allyship, advocacy, and privilege. But most importantly, we talk action. Because without action, we stay still. And when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, stillness is never the answer. Welcome to As Diverse as Two Peas in a Pod.
Welcome to episode 9 of As Diverse as Two Peas in a Pod. Today, I have the pleasure to be talking to Shweta about empowering women in leadership. Shweta is the co-founder of EWOW, Empowered Women of the World, a platform to empower women around the world to discover, visualize, and actualize their success. Shweta is also a life and career coach, trained by Coactive Training Institute and Positive Intelligence. She brings with her over 20 years of experience leading people for companies like Facebook, Amazon, and Airtel, where she spearheaded diversity and inclusion initiatives across various geographies. With a strong talent acquisition and management background, Shweta advises startups on their talent acquisition, employee engagement, culture, and branding strategy. A frequent speaker at leadership events, she also contributed to best-selling books like Fast Track Your Leadership Career. Please let's give a warm welcome to Shweta on this episode of As Diverse as Two Peas in a Pod. Hi Shweta, thank you very much for joining me on this episode of As Diverse as Two Peas in a Pod. It's a pleasure to have you.
Equally excited to be here.
Yes, I'm glad actually. You and I know I've had several discussions over the last few months, and it's I'm very happy that you're here today. So I'm gonna simply start like I do usually with most guests to ask you, what's your story?
Well, Julian, I was born and brought up in India. And as you know, India is a very, very conservative, male-dominated society. And being born in India, where you see a lot of girls getting education, but not too many girls working, actually. When I was born, a lot of girls chose, teaching as a profession as compared to anything else, because it was like, it's easy to manage. Nobody wanted to go in the corporate world. And we are three sisters. My dad is a doctor, and my mom was a homemaker and is a homemaker. And I'm very proud of the way they brought us up, of saying, do what you want to do and what you feel is right. My mom has been a real driving force. In fact, both my elder sister and I were the first girls in the family who actually started working in the corporate world. So we had no clue, we had no role models. And I think a lot of women leaders specifically face this challenge of being put into a mold, if I could say. Girls are expected to be docile, they're expected to be polite, and I was the opposite. I was outspoken. I had very strong views about how the male dominated society operated, and why women leaders could not get seat on the table. And I think that somehow didn't settle very well with a lot of people that I worked with. I was a top performer for back to back for 10 years. But despite all my performance and everything, I was always labeled as aggressive because I had very strong views about certain things and never used to mince my words. So as a child, I was rebellious. It would always be, why could this be done and this cannot be done? I had a lot of questions. And I think that has what has shaped me as an individual. I speak my mind. I worked for a company called Airtel in India, which is the third largest telecom company in the world, for about 18 years, and then joined Amazon. I led their India operations, and then I moved to US about 3 years back. And to my surprise, I felt the society is no different, from
Hmm.
India to US. It is still a struggle for women leaders to have seat on the table. It is still expected that women should be, the primary caregivers in the family and should keep their family first as compared to their careers. And that led us to actually forming something called as EVOW, which is Empowered Women of the World. It's a platform where we bring all the women leaders together to empower them. The whole goal of EVOW is to discover, visualize, and actualize success of women leaders,
Hmm.
specifically women of color, because I think the unconscious bias that exists today is something which is putting women into mold, and we want to break that mold essentially. So that's my story.
Thank you very much, and thank you so much for sharing that. And I think you've kind of given a bit of a flavor of what we're going to talk about together in this next half an hour, 45 minutes. When we talk about diversity and inclusion, obviously the gender is always one of these important topics. I think it's been an important topic for a very long time. I want to say somehow, unfortunately, it feels like it has been on the table for a long time and
Yeah,
still is on the table. And we can talk about women and men and gender in different aspects, but as you mentioned a few times, I think we're going to dig a little bit deeper as well in women in leadership,
yeah,
because I think there are some very specific and particular challenges that women in position of leadership face.
absolutely.
And let's start with that. Actually, what are some of these challenges that you've noticed yourself, maybe in your
Yeah,
career or from other peers as well, for of being a woman in leadership?
yeah. Thank you for that question, Julian. I was reading a report very recently, I think early 2020s or late 2020, wherein McKinsey had actually published a report saying, women leaders at senior VP level, their percentage has now increased from 23% to 28% from 2015 to 2020.
Mm-hmm.
So if I look at that, it's like what, 5% increase in 5 years, literally.
Yeah.
And at C-suite, it is essentially it moved from 17% to 21. And this is after there's so much of talks and revolution and organizations focusing about women leaders. Women leaders, the percentage at which they hold leadership positions is extremely low still. And women of color, you can imagine it is all the
Mm-hmm.
more, lower. And one of the key things, I think the biggest challenge for women leaders is that they're usually the only ones who have the seat on the table. So there is never a role model available for them to be
Mm-hmm.
able to look up to somebody or seek advice from. And as they say, there's a boys club, and it's always difficult to be inside that boys club. And I felt that myself, multiple times, wherein oh, the men could go out for drinks or play golf, and girls will be like, okay, what do we do? We
Mm-hmm.
can't bond outside really the office environment. So that's one bigger challenge, in terms of how do you get an entry into that boys club and not feel being the only one. In fact, I think is one of the studies which said that if you are one of the onlys, as they call it, or onlys, as they call it, which means only women of color, or only LGBTQ person, or only Black person, in the leadership domain,
Mm-hmm.
you are more scrutinized, in your decisions, in your actions. There's much more harder discrimination which exists with any of the viewpoints that you bring onto the table. So
Mm-hmm.
that's definitely one of the challenges. um, I think lack of sponsors, very, very
Mm-hmm.
big challenge. And a lot of people, ask me what's the difference between a mentor and a sponsor. And my sister Rashim, she wrote a book actually called Fast Track Your Leadership Career, specifically, addressing women leaders. And it's an Amazon bestseller. And she, really described it beautifully there, saying, a sponsor is someone who would be your cheerleader even when you are not in the room.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody who will talk about you and your vision and support it, unconditionally. And typically, these people are senior leaders, 2 or 3 levels above you. And it's difficult for women leaders to find those sponsors. And
Yeah.
that's important, because having a mentor or coach is great. But if you don't have somebody who's your spokesperson, who's your cheerleader, even when you're not around, and take your ideas forward and has that unconditional trust and faith in you, is difficult. So I think sponsors is one more thing that I would definitely say.
Mm-hmm.
mm, Imposter syndrome, and we'll talk more about it, but I think a lot of women leaders second guess themselves, and I've done that myself, a lot of times, talking about, oh, am I good enough? Am I good enough to be here?
Mm-hmm.
And I coach, I do a lot of one-on-one career coaching and life coaching with women leaders and leaders of, diverse backgrounds. And that's something which gets highlighted most of the times when people don't trust their own self and believe that, oh my God, I don't belong here, or this is something which, I don't deserve. I think that something is what plays on the mind. And last but not the least, I think the work life balance. A lot of people, all, especially when it comes to women, there is a lot of discussion around, oh my God, are you will you be able to manage work life balance? How would you, manage all the things? But in today's world, the fact is both men and women struggle with work life balance. But I think the society expects so much from women that, if a woman in the team would say, I need to leave early today because I need to take care of my child, the first thing that hits as an unconscious bias is, oh, you know what, this is going to be a constant challenge. But if a
Mm-hmm.
male counterpart says, I want to leave early today to take care of the house or take care of the kids, everybody would look up to them with a sense of appreciation that, wow, he's taking that extra step of being a family person. And I don't know why that discrimination actually exists, because I think we are equals, as much
Mm-hmm.
as ownership of family is mine, is ownership of, the male counterpart or my partner per se. So I think these are some of the key challenges that I think that exist for women in
Mm-hmm.
leaders.
That was a beautiful way to put it together. And I'm gonna jump in, I think, because it's such an amazing topic on your third challenge here around the imposter syndrome
Yeah.
and kind of trusting yourself. Um, in your experience, what have you found that kind of works or helped you kind of fight or overcome that imposter syndrome and kind of trusting your own voice at the end of the day as well?
Yeah. I think that feeling of not belonging here or not being good enough or getting, your achievement by fluke and not by the work that you have done, definitely comes into the mind. And for a lot of working professionals, male or female, actually, both of them. And I think that's something I read somewhere. I think it was International Journal of Behavioral Science, which said 70% of people at some point of their, career um, have that feeling of imposter syndrome. And simple things, to do. One is, of course, identify your strengths. And
Mm-hmm.
again, I keep going back to fast track your leadership career, because we have a whole chapter there on imposter syndrome. And for people who haven't bought the book, I will definitely recommend, because it helped me a lot. Reading just through it, identifying your strengths is so important. What are you good at, and be honest with yourself. This is what I am good at. And sometimes people ask me, what if I don't know what I'm good at, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then I tell them, go back to your colleagues, go back to your family members, go back to your friends, and ask them, what do they admire about you? And most often you will find your answers. um, so that's the first step towards feeling good about yourself and acknowledging the fact that you bring something onto the table, and you
Mhm.
may not see it. It could be your blind spot, but others see you, with your strengths. That's where I, typically start. The second thing which I do say is, build your PQ, positive quotient, as they say it. And I attended one of the sessions by Coach Sherzad, and I was so impressed by the way he brought it all together. And it's about, finding or reframing your experiences. Every time, especially women, if they fail, they are much more harsher on themselves, much more
Mhm.
harder on themselves. And that self doubt continues to creep in, that, oh, we are not good enough, right? And every experience that you have, it's important for you to step back and say, can I find one positive thing which happened in this entire experience for me, even if it is the most negative experience? Or what did I learn out of this experience? I think reframing your mind is very, very important, to overcome imposter syndrome and just build your self esteem. Um, and then I think, last but not the least, is owning and celebrating your own success.
Mhm.
Women leaders are the most shy people, to, um, what do I say, celebrate their success. We want to hide under the table. We don't take compliments well. We're like, okay, it happened, I didn't do much. Oh, this was expected out of me. And I always say, amplify your success. And that's what our mission is, with EVOW, to amplify the success of women leaders and people of diverse, backgrounds. Because the whole concept is that your small success may seem small to you, but could be very inspirational for somebody else. So go ahead, don't shy away from sharing your achievements, going out and talking about your success. So next time you do a project well, or you do something great with your customers, or just get a compliment from your children that you are a great mom, go ahead and share it with your network. Get all the positive vibes that you can get and celebrate your own wins, because I think that really helps you build your confidence as such.
Mhm.
And everybody makes mistakes, nobody is perfect, so own your mistakes and move forward. I think that's how I think you deal with imposter syndrome when you are, down and out. When you hear good things about yourself, your self confidence builds.
Mm. There is something I loved in the way you said about the strength and about that kind of positive attitude as well to it, and that celebration. And I'm sorry, I'm gonna call out something you said earlier on, which I found very interesting, because you mentioned, okay, when I was a child, I was being called rebellious.
Yeah,
And when you say the word rebellious, I think for a lot of people it has an element, especially when you put yourself in the shoes of the parents. There's probably a bit of a negative element to it, or
yeah,
a side to it. Being rebellious is not a good thing. But
yeah,
actually, if you look at it in a positive way, with a strength view, as you said, you
yeah,
were inquisitive, you had critical thinking, you were being
exactly.
curious. And suddenly, I think looking at it in those eyes is a very different, has a very powerful way to actually lift you up. And it's interesting indeed, as you say, how the also the words have such an impact. um
Absolutely. It's about small choices that you make. And I'm sharing a personal side of myself. I decided not to get married, and not that I'm against the idea of marriage, but I'll say I haven't found my right one, so I'm okay with it. And in India, marriage is such an important, institution.
mhm,
And for people to say that you are not married is almost taken as a taboo, or it's like demeaning. And it's hilarious when I hear about it. And I think in one of the interviews that I was giving earlier, a couple of years back, I remember telling, the interviewer as well, one of my managers, and I was a great top performer, and they would always ask me, great, you're doing so well professionally, but when are you planning to settle down? And I'm like,
mhm,
what is settling down? I am settled, I'm happy in my space, and I'm doing well for myself. um, but this whole notion of, oh, when do you plan to get married, is such a big issue, or such a big topic of discussion, that it's hilarious for people to imagine, in India especially, girls not being married. So
Mhm.
it's okay, and that's why maybe I'm treated as rebellious, but I'm like, what, I take life as it comes. I'm enjoying the space that I'm in, and that's what is important. I'm not answerable to anyone, and that's what I tell all
Mhm.
the women leaders: make your choices. If that's the career that you want to pursue, just go for it. And it's
Mhm.
tough sometimes, for our parents, others, oh, your daughter is not getting married, what's happening there? And it's like, it's okay. You have, your success is not measured by what you do as a woman in terms of what society expects you to do,
Mhm.
right? In terms of be a wife, be a mom, but I can be me. And that's what I tell everybody, at EWOW, that just be you. Don't bucketize yourself by saying, I'm a mom, I'm a professional, I'm a woman in
Mhm.
tech, or I'm a woman in HR. It doesn't really matter. You are you.
Yep. And that's a beautiful way to put it, indeed. And I think, and you're right. Actually, we talk a lot here about women in leadership, but actually, it's way more complicated than that. You brought up culture differences that come into the mix.
Absolutely.
There is our own personal culture as well, and experiences that we've gathered from years and years before that we have to, and our beliefs. Some of them are limiting. So you're
Yeah.
right. Actually, being you at the end of the day is a very important thing. And so just to come back to another thing you mentioned, because you mentioned about sponsors and mentors, and
Yeah.
um, what's a good way for, so let's say a woman that is just starting in leadership and is starting to navigate this world. How can they build alliance to help them thrive in the workplace?
Yeah. And for me, building that alliance is essentially building your network and finding sponsors. So the first tip that I'll give to you is, please scan your environment. Find out
Mhm.
who are those top, two or three leaders that you admire and you're able to resonate with, especially if you're in the corporate world, and lean in on them, to become your sponsors. It is okay to reach out and say, I want to block some time on your calendar and I want to talk about it. Learn from them, share your vision with them, and build your network as sponsors. Typically these are people who are 2 or 3 levels above you. They're respected in the organization, their opinion matters, and that's how you start networking with them. That's the
Mhm.
first tip that I give. The other one is, there are plenty of organizations who are doing great work, just like EWOW. We bring in people from diverse backgrounds, not only women leaders, but a lot of our followers are actually people who are male allies or people from LGBTQ
Mhm.
community, veterans, for that matter. Find out which, organization you're able to resonate most with, and
Mhm.
associate yourself, follow them, because that's how you meet very diverse set of people. Like you and I met, completely random, through this the CTI course that we are doing. But I think it's important for especially women leaders to step beyond their comfort zone to network. And networking is a
Mhm.
skill. It's not something that you get, very easily. And some of the ways of networking is attending these forums or attending, the conferences that you have. I think building your network is very, very important, both internally within an organization and externally as well. If whatever way you can contribute, some of them are good speakers, you can be on the panel. Some of you are creative, go support them, as voluntary people to build their social media campaigns or something like that. I think find your voice is what I'll say. Whatever appeals to you, get associated with the cause which resonates with you the most. I
Mhm.
think these two tips, is something which I will definitely give to people. One is network, find your sponsors, and last but not the least, give back selflessly. It's important for you to celebrate not only your success but success of other leaders that you admire, and especially women leaders or
Yes.
people from diverse backgrounds, because their journey and their the path that they have to follow is much more tougher. So if you're going through your LinkedIn and you see a great post or an article that you read, go ahead and like it, go ahead and share it. That's how you build your community essentially. And once you do that, I think all things naturally fall into place. You
Yes.
learn from each other. I'm a strong proponent of peer learning. You learn a
Mhm.
lot by just interacting with people. Every time I interact with somebody, there's a new perspective that I get, and
Yes.
that widens your horizon essentially.
Definitely. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing those tips. And what I want to do now is, I mean, they, as much as those tips are probably extremely helpful for people, for women who are jumping into that journey. I think one of the main things as well from As Diverse as Two Peas in a Pod, this podcast is about how people who are not from these groups can support. So I think I want to move away now from giving tips to young women who are moving into leadership, to all those people who are not experiencing these challenges,
Yeah,
meaning people like me
yeah,
who have never been a woman in leadership, obviously. So, what can we do to support that change? So, I'm a man in the boardroom. I have my biases. I have some of them are unconscious. I
yeah.
don't always know what to do. I might be worried about doing the wrong thing, but I really want to do something. What is it that I can do to help create that change?
You asked a very good question, and a lot of people are aware of it, but they don't know what to do about it.
Mhm.
And let me put it this way: lead by example. I read somewhere it said equality is a verb, which means you need to take action, right? And it starts with very, very small things like um, I'm going in a panel and speaking. I'm Julian. I'm in a panel. I'm speaking, and I see the panel has all white male. Can
Mhm.
I go back and highlight that it needs probably a person of color or a woman to be on the panel with me? So create opportunities for your team members, for your colleagues, where you don't see them getting represented.
Mhm.
That's the first basic step essentially. Look around you, your team, for example. When you are building your own team, are you bringing in people with diverse perspectives? I'm not talking about gender, I'm not talking about race, but I'm just saying, are you cloning yourself, or are you bringing people who have diverse perspectives than you? And it is beyond race, ethnicity,
Yeah.
and gender essentially. So if one is just being self-aware of how your team structure is, how are you leading by example? Are you creating opportunities for people of color, of diverse backgrounds, to
Mhm.
have those opportunities? And you touched something which was around unconscious bias, and that is definitely a challenge, because most of the times we don't know. And this kind of introspection of scanning your own team, scanning your environment, scanning the panel that you are on, gives you that opportunity to see, oh, I'm happy that I'm getting an opportunity, but can I create opportunity for another speaker that I know from diverse background, who can be here and add value to it, right? um, Second, as I'll say, please become sponsors for women leaders,
Mhm.
uh, or even for that matter, as I said, again, people of diverse backgrounds. You should be championing them, should be talking about them. The next time when you're sitting in a meeting and you see that a women leader is making a point and nobody is listening to her, ask the panel to stop, or the team to stop for a moment and say, hey, I think XYZ is making a great point, let's discuss more about it.
Mhm.
And that's how you check yourself in terms of how you can support people of diverse backgrounds. Because it's not just about saying, oh, I'm a great supporter, and doing nothing about it.
Mhm.
So that's what I call leading by example. Go ahead and help them.
Very good, very good. And I think it's worth repeating as well a little bit what you mentioned earlier on about being a sponsor, because you
Yeah.
clearly made the difference between being a sponsor and being a mentor. And I think If I was a man on the boardroom, being a sponsor, I think it's something that is going to be very important because as you said, it's about amplifying the voices of
Exactly.
people who are maybe these onlys in the room or are not as represented as the rest of the people. But it's not about me coming in and saying this is how you should do to be able to grow in your role or advance and so on, because there I'm bringing an experience that actually is not the same experience than that person.
Exactly.
So
One
I'm
is
not being a
guiding them
mentor,
how
I'm
they
being a
can,
sponsor.
yeah, one is just guiding them how they can proceed in their career. The second one is that's mentorship,
Mhm.
mentoring somebody how they can progress. Sponsorship is going one step beyond it, of saying, I'm not guiding you of how you need to take care of your career, because that's what you're already doing. I'm going to be that spokesperson for you in that room. Next time a
Mhm.
critical project comes in and say, I think this person brings ABC skill set, and let's loop her or him into the project because of what they bring onto the table.
Mhm. That's beautiful. Um, I want to take it to into a different direction a little bit, maybe at a higher level. Um, what are your thoughts on how you could achieve that kind of equal treatment in the organization? So we talked a little bit about
Yeah.
what women in leadership can do, what men around the table can do as well to support. But as an organization as a whole, what are some of the things that can be done to kind of create that more of that equal treatment?
Yeah. And you'll be surprised, Julian. I've worked for very large organizations. And one thing which I've always felt uncomfortable with is diversity being a lip service. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
we should do this. Let's build some ERG groups. Let's do some events. That's not what diversity is all about. If as an organization you don't create that inclusive culture where people can bring their true selves and authentic selves in, diversity is meaningless. If a lot of organizations today focus on attracting diverse talent and getting them into the
Mm-hmm.
workforce, right? Great. But what do you do after they come into the workforce is equally important. And that's where our organizations also need to focus on their energies on. When we say senior vice president ratio of women leaders has increased from say 23% to 28%, great. But how many of those 28% get retained in the organizations that
Mm-hmm.
they join is equally something which organizations should look at. So go deeper, you know um, as an organization, go deeper how your attrition looks like, how your succession planning looks like, and what opportunities are you actually creating for people of diverse backgrounds to succeed in your organization is
Mm-hmm.
extremely important. And all this starts with those small actions that we talked about, of saying, when you build up a project, do you ensure that people from different backgrounds are also included in that project? Do you not categorize or label them into, oh, she's vocal because she is ABC, or from this background, or from this culture? I think that's where people need to really focus on training on unconscious bias. Diversity inclusion is great, but I think till the time leaders don't essentially demonstrate what it
Mm-hmm.
means to be, you know I'll say, creating that inclusive culture, it's never going to succeed. So, as organizations, next time when you sit down and say, who are my critical successors, go a bit deeper and say, if I want to build my bench, I should not only focus on people who have the privilege, to people who don't have that privilege, and what can I do to invest in those people so that
Mm-hmm.
at least they have similar opportunity as well. That's why equity, as they say, is very, very important. For you to be able to create that environment where people have equal opportunities is also important.
Yeah. No, very true. So you mentioned a little bit about at the beginning about the organization that you're part of
Yeah.
and leading, EWOW, and you shared with us a little bit about the goal of the organization, which I'm sure maybe you can repeat a little bit more for our listeners. But how do you achieve that goal with
Yeah.
EWOW?
So, as I said, EVOW is a platform wherein we are helping women leaders and people from diverse backgrounds to essentially discover, visualize, and actualize success. And we believe that all women and people from diverse background are equally leaders in their own domain, and all they need is an intellectual platform to be able to support not only their technical but leadership skills. And that's what EVOW essentially does. We do an annual conference every year wherein we bring in at least 15 to 20 diverse leaders from different companies, different backgrounds to come and share their views on technology, leadership, entrepreneurship. A lot of leading organizations like Roku, Tile, Facebook, LinkedIn
Mhm.
have been our sponsors for last 3 years, and they continue to come back, which is great. um, we have our EVOW podcasts. We do regular podcasts on topics like we discussed imposter syndrome or finding your sponsors.
Mhm.
It's available on various platforms on Amazon, and other places. So you can definitely look in there. A lot of focus that we also do is on affirmations, positive affirmations. So you can see that or hear that on Amazon. We provide one-on-one coaching to a lot of women leaders today. So that's something that you can be part of. We do a lot of webinars. So you can be part of the panel if you wish to, or you can be attending, a session. So the whole idea is to build that community of leaders who are either allies of women leaders to succeed, or women leaders themselves, and make
Mhm.
this as a momentum, to continue to succeed. Small things like, we are doing a session, this Friday, which is around how do you negotiate salaries, and a lot of women leaders shy away from even asking, for a better pay for themselves, so
Mhm.
how do you go about doing that? We did a recent one, wherein we were talking about how do you overcome this imposter syndrome. So a lot of those kind of opportunities is what we create. We do a lot of trainings around DEI, we do coaching, we have our own podcast, and definitely our annual conference is something. It was named as one of the best conferences in the Bay Area in 2020. A lot of our women leaders are associated with us through that.
Definitely something to celebrate for sure.
Absolutely.
Congratulations. And so, for people listening, for myself, anyone else, how can we help you and support you in that project and that journey?
Well, if you are a women leader, please follow EWOW. You will get some great insights there. Share your stories. We do our podcast. We'll be happy to have you as our guest. Become sponsors of our EWOW Summit. Because it just brings all the women leaders together. You find great talent when you meet people. There's so many companies who've hired, some of the participants who came into the conference, because you get visibility to the larger world. And most importantly, continue to amplify your success and your strengths, by sharing it with others. And that's the whole goal of EVOW. Share your
Mhm.
intellect, share your leadership, share your entrepreneurship experience, and help us build that community.
Amazing. We've had so many really, really cool topics today. I really loved our discussion. What's one thing that you would want to leave us with and leave our listeners with?
Yeah, I always say keep empowering the world. That's our logo and motto for EVOW. We are all leaders in our own way. So continue to shine, continue to celebrate your success. That's important, and continue to nurture the future women leaders who are in your network. So I leave my listeners with that: empower yourself and empower the world.
That's a beautiful thing to finish with. I do have one last question for you. If anyone wants to get in touch with you, they want to learn more about what you're doing, what EWOW is doing, what's the best way to reach out?
Yeah. Our website is ewowglobal.com. You can log on to the website and you can see that. Feel free to write to us at empoweredwow@gmail.com. We are on Twitter, so you can find us on Twitter as well. And stay connected. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm always very, very active. So I'll be happy to connect with all our listeners today.
Brilliant. Well, Shweta, thank you so much for being with me today. It was a pleasure to have you. And I hope you'll come back actually, and we can
Absolutely,
talk
Julian.
more about some of these topics. I think there is so much to unravel and discover still, but it was a pleasure to have you, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Julian. It was a pleasure to interact with you as well. And I'm glad we got this opportunity. I can't wait for us to get together again.
Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. We'd love to hear from you. To catch all the latest from us, you can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube at As Diverse as Two Peas in a Pod. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.